Hello, everybody. My name is Jeff Ferguson. I am one of the partners at Amplitude Digital here in lovely Los Angeles, which you can see behind me. No, you can't. All you can see is my library. And this year I am happy to present at SMS. I miss you all in person. This is a conference that I've been to several times despite my distance. Barry is a longtime friend of mine, and I'm always happy to help out this conference and come and visit your beautiful country. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about machine learning and artificial intelligence and a bunch of other cool stuff like that, and how it's actually affected the search engine marketing parts of our world. And so let's get to it, shall we? So before we get too deep in all this kind of stuff, there is a lot of confusion around the concepts of things like machine learning and artificial intelligence, and even some confusion around concepts such as RankBrain, which is one of the aspects of Google's ranking system that's out these days. And so let's take a minute and figure out what all these different terms mean, because it can get quite confusing because of some really bad reporting over the years. So first and foremost, what is artificial intelligence, right? So no matter what you've heard out there, no matter how many times everybody's kind of talked about it, no matter how many times salespeople have run up to you and said, hey, we've got the latest in AI, or we've got this kind of stuff. Artificial intelligence is actually still just science fiction, right? It's actually not something that really exists. But if it does, you got to look at it from the idea that it is an overarching kind of name for a lot of different type of technologies. But the true form of artificial intelligence, which is this idea that you've actually got machines mimicking a human thought process and things like that, still isn't here yet. We're not there yet. We've come a long way in the last couple of decades here as far as getting close to that ideal, which is both very cool and very terrifying at the same time. But we're not there yet. It's not there. So in reality, every time you hear like a salesperson or somebody use the terms like, hey, we've got AI and stuff like that, they're incorrect. They really don't have AI, but they've got something else that we'll talk about in a minute. However, now, I've just made you smarter than most of the world's population in knowing this difference to it. And so you'll have to be frustrated with everybody that misuses this term, just like I am every day. But yeah. But what they are really talking about is machine learning. Now, machine learning is really an algorithm when it comes down to it. It's something that's been around for a long time as a concept goes. But a machine learning one is really this concept is a machine that has actually learned, that has the ability to actually learn a really specific set of tasks, right? And which is why it's not artificial intelligence, because it's still this phrase where it's really specific. You have to give it a really specific job. You have to program it and do it. You have to teach it. Humans actually have to handhold this process through a learning process that we'll talk about in a little bit later. But there's a lot of human interaction to kind of make this work the way it is now. Machine learning, kind of in practice that you guys may see all the time, is if you're, in the SEO world and things like that. We'll talk about RankBrain in a minute, but that is a machine learning system that Google actually uses to do a lot of stuff. But in reality, behind the scenes, there actually is a group of humans that actually do quality control. And that quality control group has a guide that you've probably heard of these days that actually gives us all lots of great tips about how to optimize our pages. And if you've ever heard the terms like EAT and things like that came out of that type of document, that's, a system in place. But it's not like those things are actually ranking factors, I guess is the best way to put it. It's more along the lines that those things are systems that the humans use to judge pages, and they will go through and actually teach the machines how to use this stuff. And the machines are coming up with their own ways to kind of interpret things that are, it's not something that you can actually teach because they're human functions. Something like quality is still kind of like a squishy kind of function that only humans really know how to figure out. But you can kind of guide machines along the way to kind of say, like, we think this is quality and we think this is quality. And machines will make up their own minds about like what they consider that collection of things that made up that quality in that moment. But it's not necessarily the same thing, which is why it doesn't work all the time, but it works better than it ever has, right? But like I said, this is really where we are these days. Mostly the time when people talk about artificial intelligence, they're really talking about machine learning. And we talked a little bit about how those things are actually different and how they actually work these days. But just remember, like, artificial intelligence is still very much science fiction. Machine learning is here and now, and it is in it's happening all around you, whether you want it or not. It is something that is just crept into it over the last couple of years. A lot of it has to do with the fact that, our abilities to create better storage systems and better processing power and a bunch of other things have all come into existence that have allowed this to actually happen. Right. And so what is RankBrain? Like I said, RankBrain is actually one of Google's ranking algorithms, right? And Google has a collection of ranking algorithms to do things, and some of them have to do things like site speed, and others have to do with things like mobile friendliness and inbound links and a bunch of other pieces to it. And RankBrain is one of those pieces of the puzzle. And RankBrain is, like I said, is a machine learning system that was actually invented at Google. And it is really designed to help Google kind of like bridge the gap in search results these days. And it's certainly not new. It's actually been around for a little bit now. But its sole purpose in life is this idea that Google was noticing that there were instances where people could type in a query and not get anything back, right? Not even an ad, not anything. They would actually just come back with blank search results that would actually say, hey, look, we don't have anything for this specific search. It's not that they didn't. It's just that Google didn't understand what you were looking for necessarily because nothing specifically lined up with that is. However, what RankBrain kind of does is basically saying, hey, look, this is actually kind of like something that we've got over here, and this data is very similar in nature. So we're actually going to basically serve up a bunch of results that we think are actually going to answer your query pretty well. And most of the time it actually works. Every now and then you'll get a dud, obviously, but for the most part, what Google is actually serving back these days is something that is exactly what you're looking for, at least close enough that you can actually poke around and learn whatever it is. And if it isn't, and you back away, whatever it is, the machine actually learns a bit. So believe it or not, you're actually part of the training system for RankBrain these days, is the ability whether or not you keep digging deeper into these things and keep reading the results come up for specific queries. But it is one of the reasons why you actually just don't see a lot of instances of, hey, sorry, we can't find anything type of results out of Google anymore, is thanks to RankBrain. Like I said, it's a complex system, and we've tried to make it a little bit more easier on the eyes here with this model to it. But basically, the idea is that it's a system where you actually have to train the machine to actually do these things. And to do that, you give it a set of training data. And in this case, it's something where Google's very human quality control team that they've got running behind the scenes there actually looks at real web pages, and they have a big document that they go through that judges all these things, the quality guidelines that you can actually find. They released them to the public a few years back and kind of update them every now and then. And they've got different rules and a point system and things like that they go through, and they'll turn around and actually look at a web page and decide, hey, look, this web page is quality, or it's not quality anymore, or it follows these rules, or it doesn't. And it's all based on a point system, and those point systems actually fed back into this system of training data that's to it, and the machine actually looks at it and says, all right, I got it. This is that score. I get it. I understand. This page looks like this. And then the machine learning system will actually look over everything on that page. It'll look at all the content. It'll look at everything that's on there and kind of go, okay, this content that I'm reading right now gets this score, and that's the judge of quality, and that's the judge of everything else to it. And so it comes up and kind of figures this thing out, and then passes on and goes, great, yeah, and it kind of creates this model to it. If it's not quality, it kind of throws it out and says, well, that's not a good example of it, or whatever it is, but it feeds it back. Then eventually, after a while, Google actually will start feeding it regular pages on its own and say, hey, evaluate this and figure it out. And figured out. And so that's not necessarily the RankBrain, by the way. That's actually another system that's built into it, but it's something where that's how the system works. It was over enough time, Google will start feeding it real data. It'll compare itself to the notes that it's taken over time that basically the quality control people have done to teach them kind of stuff. And then it'll go great. There's other systems in place that are just like it, by the way, that actually test these things. They go through and they'll look at, click data. They'll look at other types of data. And while things like engagements and click data and a bunch of other things actually aren't ranking factors per se, they are things that actually all are used by the humans at Google to kind of train these systems. So you can see the idea is like you still have to handhold it. You still have to train this animal that we've created here to do this kind of stuff. But it's something where the reason why it's not full artificial intelligence is because you can't just turn it on and let it do its job. You actually have to kind of hold its hand for a while, like a child. So why does this all kind of matter? Like, why are we even talking about things like machine learning and artificial intelligence and things like that? Well, there's a lot of reasons, right? Google itself processes over 3 billion searches a day across the planet. And on any one of those given days, 15%, sometimes say 15 to 20%, depends on which article you read, of searches had never been done before. That I always think is kind of mind blowing, by the way, is the idea that, like, of all the searches, 3 billion searches a day, day after day after day after day, like somehow 15% of those searches, that's the first time that searches happen. And obviously it comes down to things like differences in languages and different ways different things are searched and misspellings and new configurations, but it's just new stuff, new things that come out every day, new things that exist that nobody's ever searched before. And because that constant barrage of new that's coming out, Google has to invent systems like this to basically help bridge that gap between all the new stuff and what it is, and making sure that it's got results for all those brand new searches that happen every day. Otherwise, Google on the paid ad side would be leaving money on the table, and it would leave you as a very unsatisfied customer. Okay. So artificial intelligence itself, and even this chart you can see actually misuses the term artificial intelligence, right? But it's going to have a substantial thing, did market leaders, and it's a variety of different things. You see some really cool things, but the stuff that it's really looking at here is this kind of concept of delivering the right message at the right channel at the right time, which is just like the big time goal of any marketer anywhere, right? That's your job as a marketer, to want to be able to do that and talk to your audiences that way. But there's other cool things like figuring out campaign analytics automatically, hyper-personalization at scale, customer segmentation, lookalike audience model, things like that. Where these kind of things are stuff that are best left to the machines, because honestly, we tried to do them ourselves for years. As somebody who's been doing this for like 25 years, it's something that is not easy by any stretch of the imagination. So it's better to kind of let the machines actually do their work and this kind of stuff, and they're doing fantastic, as we'll talk about a little bit later. Another big reason why this is all important is mobile, right? You probably heard the factors out there. People are just, using your phones. And even when you think they've used their phones as much as they can, they use them even more, right? People are checking their smartphones 150 times a day. More than 1.2 billion people use their web via mobile devices. 57% of the time that we use our smartphones, we're also using another device, that kind of co-viewing kind of thing that's going on, usually when you're sitting in front of the television. 2.8 hours per day, which is 55% of all the time spent online, is on a mobile screen. And you've probably heard some other great statistics out there, like 70% of all searches done on Google are on mobile devices as well. And it's something where, like, Google just knows, like, hey, look, this is going to be a major thing to it. We have to figure it out. You've seen other kind of crazy stuff too, is like, the amount of total digital minutes, whatever it is, that are around the world that comes from this stuff. In the USA, we feel we've got a pretty good one, but we're nothing compared to Indonesia that's out there. But it's people are just on their phones a ton. Right. I always think these are kind of funny here. Like, more than 3 in 10 would, stop sitting their friends in person rather than give up their phone. Almost a third of Americans would rather give up sex for a year. This is going to be the end of our species, by the way. It's because nobody will give up their phone. 45% said they would put off going on a vacation rather than give up their phone. 46% would be willing to give up day off per week rather than give up their phone. Right. So people are attached to their phone. They're not going to go anywhere. Right. And for good reason. You can kind of see that smartphones have become like the new normal for how things go. You can kind of see 65% of all searches, or at least on this chart, are doing that. I think it's up to 70 by now. 63% of just browsing the internet in general has started on your phones and then moved elsewhere. Shopping, planning a trip, all these kind of stuffs are all starting on your phone and then eventually moving to a PC, maybe a little bit moving to a tablet afterwards. By 2020, which is this year, obviously, more people will have mobile phones than running water or electricity at home. Isn't that encouraging? I never know when I see this number. It's like, is that really good or really bad? That more people have phones than they do have running water. Mobile will generate nearly half of all e-commerce sales, and 85% of customer actions will be managed without a human. And by the way, this data was before, right? This is pre-pandemic data that people were throwing these numbers around like this stuff, that 85% of our actions will be managed without a human. And given what COVID did to the planet and how we all responded and how we kind of jumped into the internet as a savior for this kind of stuff, these numbers are clearly probably a lot higher. Another big reason that artificial intelligence and machine learning have come to the forefront is this concept of Internet of Things, which is just inescapable right now. You know, the number of connected devices basically will exceed 50 billion by the end of 2020. It's something that is inescapable. Right, it's just freaking everywhere. They're all at my house right now as I record this, all around me. They help turn on my holiday lights this year. I can yell at any one room and have a bunch of control stuff. They're just there. Internet of Things is here to stay, and everybody's got a couple of these devices kicking around these days. These are even like the older devices these days. But I'm sure I've got one just about in every other room in this house. The only reason they're not in every room is because you get them too close together, they can hear you. You never know which one you're talking to anymore. Everybody seems to have their own platform that's out there. You've got Hound, which is a beta for kind of like the Android system that's kind of out there. Not the Android system, another one that's out there. Obviously Siri, it's been around for a while. Google Now's got one. Cortana, which is Microsoft system as well. These systems are kicking around and all part of the same systems to it that actually help you control things. And frankly, I love them. Cortana is even like built into Xboxes these days, which is kind of cool that you can actually turn around and like talk to your Xbox unit a little bit. But frankly, I think that one doesn't work as well. So that's your kind of like big broad introduction of like, what it is and why it is and things like that. But obviously this is a search conference. And so let's talk a little bit about search. How is it actually involved in everything? Let me get a cup of tea. All right. So how's it actually interacting these days, right? So a lot of people will often ask me is RankBrain the new way that Google ranks search results? And no, it isn't. It's actually not the things. RankBrain is part of Google's overall search algorithm. It's actually one of many different pieces. It's a computer program that's used to sort through the billions of pages it knows about and find the ones deemed most relevant for particular queries, right? Google's current search algorithm is still called Hummingbird. You've probably heard that before. It's been around for a while. They actually haven't updated the run, but that's kind of like the core algorithm. Is still called Hummingbird and still hasn't changed for a while now. And like I said, it's a system where it's really there to help kind of bridge that gap and do something like figure out all the places where it can answer things that maybe haven't been asked before. So how does it come to when it comes to like SEO and stuff like that? So usually when I talk SEO, I break it into three big piles. I know people love to do the on page and off page and technical and non-technical or whatever it is. I actually do three piles. I do it content, site architecture, and inbound links. And so that's how I'm actually going to kind of like present the little pieces of the puzzle today. Let's start with content. All right. So what you're going to want to do to kind of prepare yourself for the coming onslaught of machine learning and things like that, or at least lean into it a little bit more, is you want to get ahead of voice search. Now, voice search, the numbers of voice search, by this point in history, there were numbers that were thrown around where it was going to be up to 20% of searches. Then a lot of people came back and said that was probably overswinging it a bit. I actually haven't seen like modern numbers that I really like that say the percentage of it, but it's certainly not going away, and it is increasing every year. So, but it's not to the point where you've missed the boat on voice search at this point. So how can you actually get ready for it? It's basically leaning into the idea of using your content to actually answer questions. Right. And this was a good strategy even before voice search, but now that voice is around and you've got people that are actually asking full sentence style questions that are different devices, it's something you can't avoid anymore. Right. And 61% of growth in queries starting with who, what, where, why, and how. So we're seeing this already, right? Even just when they're typing it in, not necessarily voice search, but people are already typing full sentences in, which means their brains are starting to rewire this idea of getting away from the old school keyword based stuff and actually instead using full sentences and full sentences. And like enough, Google's kind of prepared for this already, which is, another reason why they're using RankBrain. But when it comes to voice search, it's going to really change things because that's just the way everybody's going to be talking to this thing. Almost 10% of voice search queries start with a who, what, where, why, and how, as opposed to 3.7 of text queries. How begins about 3.6 of them. What begins about 3.5, right? So you need to start like writing and thinking and doing things along those lines that really kind of like tie in naturally to it. And even if it's not a direct headline or that basically, is a specific question, something like that, that, which it actually does work. But as long as you're really writing content that has that feeling like it is answering something, you'll kind of be in a good spot. Most brands actually waste their time on creative blog posts that no one wants to read in the first place, right? And again, this is a good tip, period. Not necessarily just about machine learning, but machine learning is going to make this problem jump to the forefront even more. People are basically writing blogs for stuff that nobody's searching for in the first place. So instead, focus on answering common questions about your product or service. Headlines are always important, even more so in a mobile-first world. So, spend your time to make sure that you're actually, writing stuff that is actually, there to answer queries about your products. Work with your sales force. Work with your customer support teams. Work with everybody to kind of create this content that actually aligns with how people are searching, right? And it'll do you a favor right now, even before mobile gets more friendly. But when mobile and voice search really kicks in, you'll be there, and the machines will appreciate what you've just done. I actually been recommending a lot of clients these days to get back to FAQs, right? FAQs, feel a little old school, these days, but they're what people are actually searching for. They're looking for answers, right? So embrace them, start over again, start doing some new stuff. We love them. It's a great way to write content. There's a lot of different tools you can use to make that easier. Some advice from our friend Danny Sullivan here. This is actually way back in 2016, so 4 years ago. But basically, gave us a nice hat tip on the idea that Google Home will use featured snippets for answers. Source credited, but not like getting a click, right? So it's one of the things where, there's plenty of great advice out there on how to make sure that you're featured snippet friendly, that you can find out these days. But a lot of it just really has to do with firing, writing content that actually specific answers questions, and then formatting that data in such a way that Google decides hey, that's a great answer for a really specific question. All right. And we're seeing more snippets than ever, right? Right now, last count of it, we're basically up to the point where it's about 15% of all searches have a featured snippet onto it, where it's not, obviously there's 85% that don't, but 15% is a pretty nice growing number to it. It's something that's really jumped up over the last couple of years here. And some of the technology is getting very, very cool, by the way, to where you can kind of see there's a couple of examples where somebody's like, hey, Google, how do I, make a basic bundt cake or whatever it is? And it'll give you results, right? And this is a featured snippet result that'll tell you all the ways to actually make a bundt cake. But the cool thing is that if you follow up with that and say, how long does it take to cook, right? It'll actually come back and give you a really specific answer about bundt cakes, right? But you didn't say bundt cake, right? You just said, how long does it take to cook, right? A dumb computer would come back and say, how long does it take what to cook? I don't understand what you mean, whatever it is. But now this is a chain series of questions where it's actually figured out, hey, I can do this. It's pretty amazing. So one of the questions we got a lot when it comes to things like creating this type of content that is for mobile or for machine learning and things like that. So is that people always ask, does size really matter, right? So there's a lot of data out there that claims that that basically longer content actually ranks better and things like that. And a lot of those studies are actually based on correlation style studies and things like that are kind of saying, jumping to a conclusion that they really shouldn't jump to, right? Google specifically stated over and over again that longer content actually isn't what the ranking factor is here. It's just that usually longer content usually spends the time to actually answer the question better, and it's actually providing a more in-depth content. So it's really more of a quality thing than a quantity thing. But still people love to, hook themselves onto something where they go like, oh, it's this many words or it's this many characters or whatever it is. And it's really not that. It's really about answering the question. So ignore anybody that basically says, that you should actually pay attention to, have this many specific amount of words. Like, oh, you have to have 1,800 words. You have to have 2,000 words, whatever it is. It's really ridiculous if you think about it long enough, because sometimes you just don't need 2,000 words. Sometimes you need way more, right? Like if you're trying to describe how to boil water, right? You don't need 2,000 words, right? If you're talking about particle physics, you're going to need a lot more than 2,000 words, right? So that's why that is really kind of like a silly concept as far as like ranking factors go. But basically, like I said, it's all about quantity more than quantity. Don't be afraid of shorter content as long as it's good. If you write a great piece and have a great editor kind of like work it down into something, it'll actually do better. But if you can't really shorten it, and make sure those first couple of paragraphs draw readers deeper into the content itself, especially for that mobile audience that's coming out. So yes, it's not the size, but it's what you do with it. So in the past year, this is actually an interesting one where machine learning is kind of like working for us these days, is that, of course, in the past year, the Washington Post has actually been using robot reporters to write over 850 stories, including covering 500 races on Election Day back in 2016. This year, they kicked it up even more for the 2020 type of election. The Post actually believes this is a win-win with their human reporters because the robot named Helograph can actually do things like cover stories that wouldn't have been covered due to lack of human resources, did the factual heavy lifting for human reporters, and basically can also alert humans to possible news stories in big data sets, right? So what it actually did was that, it covered all these hundreds and hundreds of races that are out there, everything, all those weird little ones like dog catcher and, local things here in the United States, whatever it is, and reported on them individually using the data that it was able to and wrote this story to it. And then it can actually come back and say, hey, look, this one's actually getting some action. You may have to assign a human to it so you can actually spend some more time on it because it's actually getting some love over there. Jeremy Gilmert, who's Director of Strategic Initiatives over at the Post, basically said, we have transformed Helograph into a hybrid content management system that relies on machines and humans, distinguishing it from any technologies currently in use. It is, it's very cool. Right. It's something that this isn't going away. But notice it's a combination effort here. Right. It's something where both humans and machines are working together. Nobody's losing their job here. This is a job that nobody was able to do beforehand because they just couldn't have actually ever staffed it. Now this information is actually getting out there and doing it, and it's helping the humans actually do their job better. So that was all about the kind of the organic side of the house. And so let's talk a little bit about the paid search side of the house, right? So you'll notice right after the bat here that, first this kind of story here that Google is basically going to stop scanning Gmail to target ads, right? This is, it's back in 2017. And it was kind of like one of those indication that things are going on, that machine learning is actually kind of in place. And people always kind of thought this concept of Google kind of like, crawling the content in your email messages and stuff was a little creepy to start with, as a way to kind of like deliver content, relevant ads and stuff like that. But in reality, it wasn't, of course. It was just a machine doing stuff. But now it doesn't even need that. Basically Google's actually making this shift because it's a machine learning systems, can actually gain enough data to target ads through other means, such as pulling in search data through the network and who knows what else, right? So it's got a whole collection of stuff. So it actually doesn't need to crawl your content anymore. It's just gotten way smarter on its own. So just like I did with SEO, I generally break my paid search lectures into like 3 areas, like keywords, account structure, and ads. So we're going to do the same thing. We'll talk about keywords, right? So you've seen this slide before, right? This is the same type of thing we're talking about. Use your content, answer questions, right? And what works on the SEO side, this is actually going to work just as well on the paid search side of things, right? This is something where while everybody's still kind of like wrestling to figure out how they're going to make money off voice search, including Google and things like that. They're already starting to play with some of these things, right? Smart campaigns within side of Google Ads and stuff like that are actually becoming the answers that are popped to the top for voice searches that happen on Google Home. Amazon Alexa is actually starting to do some things along those ways. So it's time to actually go ahead and create content that actually aligns to it, but also you want to focus your keywords along these same things as well. All right. Now, where some of the real machine learning fun is happening these days, especially in Google Ads, is actually on the content, not on the content, on the creative side of things, right? And there are basically many tasks that humans still perform better than computers. And when it comes to mundane and repetitive tasks, the machines kind of hold sway here. Machine learning is particularly good at detecting subtle differences between products and optimizing them to produce more favorable outcomes, right? And so it's basically all these things of it is able to run iteration testing on a level that we've previously not been able to do on our own, where the data would take forever to do it. And this thing can do it in real time with way deeper data, with way more different aspects of data aspects to actually look at to make it happen. It's pretty damn cool. You'll actually see some of this new tech in Google Ads. I still tap AdWords. I don't know why, but this selects the best kind of ads. This optimization system's been around, but machine learning has been applied to it, and it's even better these days. But you've also got these things, custom ads by Google, which you may have seen. They got rolled out of beta, I think, last year. And basically, it's this system now where Google will actually look at all the content on your landing pages. It'll look at the different ads that you're writing or whatever and actually start writing ads for you. And people were a little miffed at this in the beginning. They're going like, I don't know if I trust a machine to do this kind of stuff. But we kind of embraced it at my agency and let them going to have a shot at it. And man, I got to tell you, if if they don't work like a charm most of the time, every now and then you'll get a dud. There will be occasional one in there where it just doesn't make sense. But the good thing is if you're paying attention, you can actually like get rid of these things before they even go live if they're just completely ridiculous. But for the most part, even though they may not be as eloquent as something that we humans like to write, they actually can do great things on their own. You get smart display ads by Google, which are super fun. You can give them all the pieces of the puzzle. You can give them headlines, you give them descriptions, you give them different images in the background, whatever it is, and it will basically iteration test the perfect ad. And it's not that it's just doing an ad based on like, hey, somebody searched for this when it showed up. Again, it's getting that concept of the right ad at the right time and the right place to the right customer kind of stuff. And so you actually have many different ads that are all functioning on different levels and optimizing that way. So it's not just like, hey, look, this is the winner. You've got multiple winners based on the situation. It's pretty damn cool. All right. When you get into account structure and stuff like that, a lot going on with retargeting these days. You get some really cool stuff happening through propensity modeling and predictive analysis that gets in a level that, heretofore we have never gotten close to. We like to think we're fantastic. I've been doing Google Ads for as long as it exists. And, people love to think that their little bit adjustments and their little things like that, we're the deal. We could do it better, whatever it is. But these days you really just can't. Right. And while it's not perfect all the time, there's plenty of times where we've pulled stuff out. This happened last week with a campaign, but most of the time this system is actually going to work way better. Oops. Like I said, voice search is mostly happening on mobile land now. Even the Internet of Things devices are considered mobile on all that stuff. That makes your account structure when it comes to mobile really important. So again, optimize for mobile. You've got a lot of AI-based tools that are coming out for these days for PPC campaigns that are out there, and for good reason. I've 2 or 3 different companies out there doing better. But when it comes down to it, I'm still seeing the best performance coming out of the tools that are built into Google itself, because it's sitting right on top of the data and it's way faster. This one was, I forget to actually put this one together, but they ran some scenarios over 2,000 different campaigns using machine learning based optimization. And it basically kicked back 71% increase in conversions, 7% decrease in CPC costs, 15% increase in clicks, 64% of accounts like a lower CPA. So these machines have got it figured out. They can work tirelessly. They have way more data to look at. They're going to be better at you than this kind of stuff. But don't worry about it. It's not like they're going to take your job or anything like that. You still got a place in this world, which is usually what most people are afraid of. They think it's going to be like, when they moved the robots into the car making factories and stuff like that, and people got laid off. It's probably not going to be like that, at least not yet. So it's one of the things where millennials even have, in millennials, the ones that are like right on top of this should embrace things even better. They're still slightly afraid of it, and they shouldn't be. 25% of them actually have some views of things like artificial intelligence and biotechnology and the Internet of Things and robotics, driverless cars, whatever it is. But it's one of the things where they even say majority would not trust decisions made by robots on their behalf. 50% would not support rights for humanoid robots. I don't think we're there yet. This isn't Blade Runner quite yet, even though this is the year it happened. But We're working on it, right? But we're still just getting started. There's still a place for you in this world. It's not only the first inning, it's the first pitch to the first batter of the first inning, as our friend Eric Schmidt liked to say. And basically, this idea is that AI is smart here, but it's not here for your job, right? It's here to make your job easier. The stuff that the machines are doing right now is the stuff that we never wanted to do in the first place. All those little micro bit adjustments, all those kind of like little switch ups on the creative, all that kind of stuff. Man, like nobody really wants to do those kinds of things. What we want to do is be creative marketers, right? Coming up with the keywords and figuring all of the scenarios, writing great copy, stuff like that. That's where we belong in this world. Let the machines have their day with this stuff. They're better at it, and everybody will win. All right. You get about 61% of people that are actually in the business world that are aware of artificial intelligence and machine learning, but only 3% consider themselves experts in the area. So now's your time to actually get on board this stuff before it gets weird. The people who win in AI are actually the ones that will be exceptional in managing their data, because AI needs a data structure set to teach its algorithm, right? This is Alan Nance of over at MRSys, right? And basically, like, you know, what I always tell my clients is that, you know, machine learning and all the robots, they like a clean surface. They like a clean workplace to work in. And that's kind of our job as the humans to be able to figure this kind of stuff out. 72% of most organizations actually have some high expectations to implement AI in the next 6 to 12 months based on certain things like driving revenue growth, but, you know, drive better serve existing customers, meet rising customer expectations, remain competitive, improve strength and brand, things like that. And again, you can get on board with this kind of stuff. You can be the one that realizes these types of things for organization if you learn on this, right? There's only about 11% of people consider themselves experts on machine learning in our organization. 34% are opportunists, 28% notices, 27% are laggards, right? But basically, you've just got a ton of people that haven't embraced this kind of stuff yet. So there's still plenty of time to jump on board and figure this stuff out before everybody gets to it. All right. It's not just a fad. This stuff is, you know, like, you know, it gets a lot of hype around it these days. People love to talk about this stuff. You can kind of see machine learning's at the top of the curve as far as this kind of stuff goes, but it's not going away. Trust me. So how do you market for the robots these days, right? So learn how to, you know, if you've got the chops for this kind of stuff, really embrace it and learn how to use this stuff. Now, Google's got systems you can actually read up on, lots of great articles on there. If you've got a little coding background, which a lot of people actually have these days, even if they're not coding related fields, you could actually build your own machine learning models and systems at home. It's kind of amazing. Microsoft has actually got a system that you can do as well. Google and Microsoft are both giving this stuff away, right? They develop these things, they're giving it away. They're hoping people will go out and actually like find things to do stuff. So that's where it is. So usually this would be the portion where you guys ask questions, but obviously this is a virtual conference these days. So I'm just going to go through and say thank you. And if you do have any questions or like that, feel free to contact me directly. You can get me on Twitter at CountZero, or at my agency's thing at Amplitude Agency, and we'll be more than happy to use it. And otherwise, I will see you all in person as soon as we can.